Okay. Okay, here we are.
All right.
There
All
it is,
righty.
streaming live.
Yes,
Okay, good.
streaming live.
Excellent.
Let me know when you want me to start.
Yep, and I can confirm we are live.
Thank you.
Excellent, thank you. So Diane, we're all ready. I guess we could start with parks. Chris, I think you could start. Can you share your screen, or did you have a presentation?
I do. Good evening, everyone. I'm Chris Yandoli. I'm the Director of Capital Projects for the Brooklyn Borough Office of Parks. Joined, well, this was already mentioned, but joined by Chief of Staff Davey Ives and our Park Manager, Lauren Sylvester. I'll run through a capital status report for the district. Davey, if I get anything wrong or you need to jump in, please do. Never been live on YouTube before, so I'm gonna give it a shot. So I'm gonna try sharing my screen now. Let me know if you can see it. Let's see. Did that work?
Yes, it
Perfect.
did.
Okay.
Looks good.
Yeah, I'm viewing a PDF, so it's gonna be, this is probably the best it can, yeah, let's see. All right, so let me know if everyone can see it as we go through. So like I said, the capital status report for Community Board 10, we'll just run through it. And if there's any questions, maybe we'll take them at the end. So the first up is a completed project. This is Fort Hamilton Athletic Field. We worked with the School Construction Authority on this one. The project was managed by the School Construction Authority, and it was a synthetic turf field reconstruction. That was completed in August of 2019. This is on the same property. This is the Fort Hamilton Field basketball court. So this is a terrible site currently, and will be beautiful when it's completed. This project is one of a few that we have that's actually sort of stuck in procurement. We're having trouble with the Office of Management and Budget getting these projects through due to some COVID-related delays as far as budget goes. Davey, I don't know if there's any other thing you want to mention on that. But as I go through, there's a few, unfortunately, that fall into that category. So we're not sure the future status of this project. But as of right now, it's in the procurement phase, and we're not sure when it will be approved to begin construction.
This is Davey. I can go into a bit more detail for what we do know of in terms of what our budget outlook looks like for the next year, but I think maybe we can go through this presentation and kind of circle back with questions at the end.
Sure.
But with all projects that are in the procurement phase, so meaning they have a design that's been completed and it's been either bid out or, kind of waiting for a contractor to give some prices for the city to put it into construction. Those projects have been put on hold. So they're currently in a waiting period. So that means that they're slightly delayed.
Right. Thank you. So moving along, this is really exciting. Councilmember Brennan funded this project. This will complete the site at Fort Hamilton. So this is Russell Pedersen Playground. We're excited about this one, and in the future, we'll shortly we'll have a scope meeting for this one. John J. Carty Park. This is a project that's under construction currently. It's a renovation of the tennis courts on site right near the senior center. This one is delayed a bit due to some of the bridge construction, and it was also put on hold because of the COVID shutdown. So it has restarted, it's back on track, and we're hoping to have it completed by this fall. And this is also exciting, funded by Councilmember Brannan, renovation of the playground at John J. Carty Park. So the agency has been working over the last few months to figure out how scope meetings will work moving forward. As of right now, I think we've settled on virtual scope meetings similar to the meeting we're having right now. So that's really exciting that we're going to actually be able to get going with some of these projects. So we'll be reaching out as soon as tomorrow morning to the board and elected officials with some possible dates for a scope meeting for this park and some others. So very exciting. Shore Road Park, the field house building is under construction. It's moving along. Again, was shut down a bit for COVID delays, but has restarted, and we're hoping to have it finished this fall. This is another site in Shore Road. It's a brand new dog run. So this is sort of near, I guess, what's called Cannonball Park, down the hill a bit near that bus stop comfort station combination. This one is in design, and we're hoping construction will start in fall of 2021. Another project in Shore Road Park. This is sort of a pathway connections project, sort of increasing accessibility and making connections throughout the park. So this one is also in design. This exciting project for us, Vinland Playground in Shore Road Park, is another one where we'll be reaching out this week or next week with some possible dates for a scope meeting for this park. So designed to start shortly. Diker Beach, we're what we call our State of Good Repair program. This one's being repaved and renovated through our citywide services. It's a sort of internal branch of the Parks Department. This is another one where we're hoping the project will start construction in spring of 21, but depending on the current climate, we're going to hope for that start date. Patrick O'Rourke is another one that we're doing under State of Good Repair. And Davey, I'm not sure. I think this one might be our green infrastructure team as well. So some of these we're partnering with DEP to do some water retention on site and some other sort of environmentally sustainable design. So this is one of those sites. This one is also in design. Owl's Head Park, we have a few projects going on there too, which is great. Also funded by Councilmember Brannan is a reconstruction of the playground. So this is another one again that we'll be reaching out for a scope meeting very shortly. And then design will start. Owl's Head Park, the basketball court, so just adjacent to the playground, also funded by the council member. Again, we're hoping to start design this fall, so that means a public scope meeting this fall.
And these two projects could be merged in the same contract. It might just be an easier thing for us to do.
Right.
Sometimes it's like buying in bulk, so you get a better price on contractors. So we're going to figure that out. But I think as far as the public will see, there'll definitely be work happening
right
here in the next couple of years.
Right. Thank you. And lastly, the Shore Parkway bike path. So recently, I'm sure a lot of you noticed we did some top course asphalt coating to sort of address some immediate safety concerns on a stretch of the bike path. This project is separate from that. So this is more of a resiliency engineering reconstruction of the seawall and the bike path and sort of a long-term strategic plan for the bike path. So we're doing our design investigations right now, and we're hoping to finish design in fall of 21. So, with that, I think that's the last project. I don't know if you had any questions from the board.
I have a question.
Sure.
When will we be notified when some of these projects that are on hold will be moving forward? Is there a date that, or is it just an ongoing hold on everything because of the budget considerations?
Davey, I don't know if you want to
Davey?
take that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can do my best at answering that one. Right now we're not really sure. I wish I had a better answer for you, but we don't really know. We're kind of waiting for more direction from City Hall. But once we get notification, I think we can definitely reach out to Community Board 10 and let you guys know that. There's also another resource called the Capital Tracker, which I don't know if anyone on the board is familiar with, but it's part of the Parks website, and for every single Parks capital construction project, there's its own web page that has kind of a tracker bar for how far along the project is. So that, and then in addition to that, it gives you an estimated date for when construction would start on that park.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really easy to use.
I can share the link to it too in the chat.
That would be great.
Okay. Henry has his hand raised.
I just wanted to ask about one of the projects you mentioned on Shore Road. You said it was like a paving connection.
Right.
I think that's just something we haven't heard about here before, and I just wasn't clear on what exactly it was.
Yeah, there were some historic pathways that have been sort of covered over the years. Sort of right from the stretch, it sort of goes from that what will be the new dog run, almost stretching all the way past the newly renovated field house to almost a Vinland playground. So it's sort of behind that baseball field along the Belt Parkway. And it'll just be sort of uncovering some of the historic pathways, because right now it's back there, it's just piles of wood chips. It's not accessible. The drainage is not great. So just making that sort of an accessible pathway. It could be a walking or a bike path, but connecting pedestrians to the comfort station at the field house and to other amenities.
And I think another thing that, anytime we do that, we'll look at the underground utilities there. I think that project will maybe do some of it between the Vinland project, that project, and the shore and the field house. We're hoping to address some plumbing issues. So all that plumbing is really ancient, from like the 30s or 40s. So that's another reason, it might seem like a kind of a trivial path, but it actually does serve a larger function.
Which is on the kitchen table, little black purse.
Oh, right.
I have a question. This is Wei Leo. This is my first time on the community board, and this is my first meeting. So pardon if I ask questions that, you guys are already familiar with, but being on this committee, is there a program that the either architect or the landscape architect or design firm requires from the community board? And do we provide any input, or do they take any input? And then are we allowed to kind of, review any conceptual designs of these parks?
Yeah.
Like, how does that whole process work?
I checked the whole thing.
So I don't, let me just make sure I mute everyone because I'm getting a little background noise. Hold on one second, Wei, and I'll answer your question.
Mhm.
If the keyboard runs out, if it's plugged in, it'll still work.
Okay, so can everyone hear me?
Very good.
Okay, so basically the community board and the Parks Committee, we do review all of the capital projects. There's an opportunity both at the scoping period of time, which is before the project is led, and Davey, maybe you could explain it a little bit better than I do, where we invite the community, the elected official, the Parks Department. We do broad advertising to invite people to put ideas about what they would like to see in the park at a scoping meeting. meeting, and it's usually either held on site. I mean, we've done it different ways. We've held it here, and people we invite from the community, activists or community residents who live near the park or who utilize the park will come and submit ideas and suggestions. And then Parks takes that back to their design people, and they kind of look at the budget and they see what's feasible, and they come up with a design. Then New York City Parks comes back to the community board, and the Parks Committee will look at those design plans. We also invite the community to comment, tweak it, have suggestions, say we hate it, say we love it. And then the Parks Chair will present that to the full board for an advisory letter to the Parks Department about how we feel about the design. Is that helpful? Oh, you're on mute. I have you on mute. You want to unmute yourself?
Sure.
Okay.
I mean, I come from a design background. I studied interior design, and I was director for like 20 plus years at various fashion luxury brands. So I know the whole, like, I understand the whole process from a fashion point of view. This is my first time on like a parks committee. So, but I have, you know, friends who do this for a living. So I was just curious to see, like, because I understand, you know, I know from experience that design, you know, there's always like multiple meetings, like there's a lot of back and forth. So I just wanted to, you know, to see if how involved are we in the whole design approval process, and who actually selects like the design architects. You know, is that out of our control? Like what
Yes.
is in our control versus what's out of our control?
Right. So scoping is within our purview, meaning, you know, putting together community review of
Like a
you know,
program?
input, the input state, and then once it's designed. But I'll hand it, Parks Department is the agency that handles the procurement, and that includes the RFPs and the contracting, and that includes who is hired to do the design. Is that right, Davey? Did I say that right?
Yeah. That you hit everything so far. I think so. Wayleo, thank you for your question. Yeah, I think just earlier in the process, it's important to understand that, you know, Parks Department doesn't have a set capital budget. So it's not like we get to say, you know, we're going to do Vinland Playground first, and then we're going to go to Shore Parkway and finish that, and then we're going to go to JJ Cardi once we're done with that. So all this money that we get for capital projects is through kind of almost like, you know, it's like community campaigning for elected officials. So, you know, Justin Brannon has been really great to us so far by funding things, and he was great before with Councilmember Gentili as well. The state senator has also been really helpful in his district for funding parks things, which is unusual for state legislature actually to fund it, because most of our money comes from either council members, the borough president, or the mayor. And so they will fund projects based on, you know, kind of the support they're getting in the community. So once it kind of is solidified in our budget, then we start that design process with the scope meeting, and then the design review once we take a first pass at it. So that's the start of it. As far as who actually does the designing, we actually have, I think if the Parks Department were a landscape architecture firm, we would be the largest landscape architecture firm under one roof. I think we have 100 or 150 registered landscape architects that work for the Parks Department. So they're obviously all across the city, but it's a pretty amazing shop that they run out there, that they do a ton of work every year. So when we can, we try to do in-house work and do it through them. They've been, you know, we've been doing so much that they do contract out designs. For that, there's a whole process that landscape architecture firms can get registered through Vendex and kind of get in our system so that they can be in kind of a rotation for projects that get bid out. I think there's like a short list of people that these go to. Yeah. Did you have a question?
There's probably like a preferred list of, you know, of design architects. They're allowed.
I think that's pretty common with city work too. So it's not only landscape architecture, it's architects, it's engineers, and kind of every kind of flavor of engineering. Whether it's geotechnical or structural or coastal. So there's a lot of different stuff that we do. Yeah. So.
And how do we prioritize the work, or like who gets to, have that renovation first over another project? Who makes
I
that
think
decision?
it's based on what gets funded in that fiscal year. I think this fiscal year we had 30 new projects in Brooklyn. So I think we were looking. I think we have. I don't know what the amount is, but at any given time in Brooklyn we have of funded and started projects, we have about 90 projects. So and it roughly breaks down a third, a third, a third. So a third of those projects are in design, a third are going through the process to get a contractor on board, and then a third are in the process of actually being built. So when it comes to prioritizing which one starts first, it's basically we've tried this year aside because of COVID. We aim to start every single project that gets funded within the fiscal year. This was something that I think when the de Blasio administration came into office, and when I think the park commissioner Mitchell Silver was, this is one of the changes that Mitchell Silver put in place, along with the website that I just shared on the Capital Tracker. So there's so these are kind of some of the changes have been implemented over the years. So as far as prioritization, every project is slated to start within the fiscal year that it's funded. So if that makes sense. If you have more questions, we could.
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, that's how it is in the fashion world too. Like, I guess, there's always that capital meeting, and that the capital funds are provided to, the most urgent projects. So sounds similar.
Yeah, and I think one other important thing to note is that, so when we do the scope meeting, we are looking for just, we're looking for as much input as possible. We're not actually doing the design. We're not laying out the spray shower and where the swings are. That
program, right? Like they're probably asking the community for like, what the needs are. Right.
Yeah.
Okay. So you get the program and pass it on to the designer, and then they come up.
Yeah, and we let the designer go to work, and then we'll schedule at a Parks Committee meeting a review of the schematic design. So just for those other less designy people, that's just kind of a map of where things are going to be laid out. So a designer has to make sure the spacing is right to accommodate for tree roots or for fall zones for play equipment and all this other technical stuff. And where the water utilities will go and how to do that in the most cost-effective way. Once that's done, then they go into contract drawings where they actually determine how many screws, how many swings, how many how many linear feet of fence are all the details under the sun are going to be in that contract, and then that is finalized into a book that actually gets put out and goes to bid. So that's why it basically takes 3 years start to finish. From
just the design part of it takes about a year.
So yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
That was probably a lot more information than anyone might maybe want to know, but if you have any other questions about it, we're happy to answer it too.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Anyone else have questions?
I feel like we're going to have a lot of things coming up this fall. So I think it seems like almost all of those we're scoping for this coming 2020, fall 2020. So looking forward to more.
Yeah, I think that the Parks Committee is going to be very busy. So in terms of scoping, I mean, I just want to share, I guess, with the Parks team, is that we have had success in reaching out, to hold public, hearings and meetings. So I guess we'll, figure out a way to do it remotely. We've been able to, do mailings to certain areas and provide the virtual link. so we could get feedback, or, you know, our email newsletter list is broadened. So I think we've really begun to adapt to the virtual world and doing public meetings. So we look forward to working with you as we move closer to those very exciting projects.
Thank you. We're definitely going to need the help, because this is there's no playbook. There's no playbook for this kind of stuff. We're just these are going to be the first round of sort of the virtual scope meetings. So
Great.
we'll figure it out together.
And so I assume that we'll be getting a copy of this PowerPoint as well?
I can send it in the morning, sure.
Great.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Chris.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
There being no other questions, I guess we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is a review of the Tropical Storm Isaias response by the Park Department. It did quite a number in our community, as in many communities. And so we're all ears.
Great. Thank you. I can take that on. Just a heads up, I think my headphones might be dying, so I will be able to talk through my computer. So, but if there might be a temporary lapse. So just let me know if you can't hear me. So yeah, so thank you. Yeah, so Storm Isaias was a big one. You know, I think this storm in terms of tree request was second to only Sandy. So if you can, so although it might not have caused that much damage in New York, it was actually quite bad in the tree world, so to speak. But basically, you know, so I think I can read our numbers, off, you know. So the way we look at it is we look at service requests. So that's anytime you call into 311, which we encourage people to do, because that creates a record of that there's an issue. So when you call into 311, that creates a record, and then it makes the Parks Department respond to that, which is kind of the only way we can guarantee that your tree will get addressed. You might not agree with the assessment from our arborists, but they are trained arborists and they do this professionally. But by putting in a service request, they will come out and visit your tree. So as far as service requests for that one little storm, we got 6,000 tree requests in Brooklyn. So of those 6,000 requests, so some of these might be duplicates, but some of those 6,000 requests, 529 were just in Community Board 10. So that's a lot of trees down for the neighborhood. I think so. We break it down by hanging limbs. So that might be a limb that fell, but it's kind of still dangling over. We go by limbs that have fallen to the ground, so they might be blocking something, and then actual trees falling down. So in Community Board 10, we had 45 hanging limbs, 205 limbs falling down, and then 279 trees that were all reported in. And then the next thing I'll go through is just our process for our how we prioritize things. So in our forestry world, we've switched from kind of the person who calls in the most gets their tree service to a actual system called risk management, where we try to prioritize the most dangerous tree situations first. So, you know, if a tree falls in a field and nobody's, you know, in danger of getting hit by it, that's going to be a low priority. Whereas if you have a tree that's kind of cracked and is falling over a car or a house or a, you know, a place where people could walk by, or, you know, like a school or whatever it is, then that's a higher risk priority. So during the storm, the way, or in the aftermath of the storm with all those requests, we went through and looked at, the first thing was trees that are blocking streets for emergency access. So that took us about a week to go through. Once we addressed trees in the street, for access and vehicular, so that other emergency services could serve their role. Then we looked at trees that had fallen on houses or structures or cars or any of those things. That was the next thing. That took another week to address, so borough-wide. And then the third thing was, kind of everywhere else. So that was in parks, in kind of non-critical areas, and trees that had kind of fallen in a relatively safe area. Now, and that took the third week. And so after those 3 weeks went by, we actually ended up, what you probably saw and you probably got tree requests for were piles of debris on the street. This response, I think we were talking to our chief of operations and he said he'd never seen such a big response to storms. We called in crews from as far as I think Buffalo to help us respond to this storm because we had so many requests. Those trees, so between contracting forces and Parks Department, the priority is to get the tree down, to chop it up, and to put it in a safe place so that the rest of the city can keep operating. The remaining time after the storm was going back and having trees cleaned up throughout the neighborhood. I know that like in Marine Park, for example, we had the parking lots in Marine Park, if you've been down there, have been filled with tree debris because it's all the contractors brought their trees there, and then they're also contracted to take it out and put it elsewhere. So it's a complicated process is what I'm trying to say here. And there is a method to the madness, although it might seem that your tree is kind of precariously out there and just kind of not being addressed. So maybe I'll close with the work orders that actually happened. So those service requests that turned into work orders where people had to actually do something. So in Brooklyn, there were 2,791. So almost half, nearly half of the tree requests were actually required our foresters or contracted forces to do something. In Community Board 10, that was 201 work orders. That included 41 hanging limbs, and the hanging limbs can be, a forester actually scaling up the tree and cutting things down. Limbs down on the ground, that was 120. Trees that were down, there were 32 downed trees. So you can imagine blocking streets and kind of the chaos that I'm sure all of you guys know about. And then we actually had to remove 8 trees during this process. So it was quite an involved response was needed to the storm. And I think, our forestry crews were working overtime around the clock to get this done. So it's an impressive effort that those guys were able to accomplish it. And I think with that, I'd open it up to questions if anyone has any.
I have a question, Thierry.
Sure.
So I pulled the 311 data, and I know it's always a tricky thing when you use open data. But I had pulled August 4th and August 5th, which I would say were the two biggest 311 reporting days. And there were 266 311 complaints that were made in the category of fallen tree. So are you saying that in total we had about 40 down trees? I realize a lot of duplicates. I didn't, go through each and every one of them. So we have a total of 40 trees.
So downed, so I think it's important. I don't know if open data, how it separates the different categories.
Downed versus limbs versus.
Yeah, I'm not sure if it breaks it down. I think that might be maybe an internal thing for parks. So
it's fallen tree, and then there's a separate category, tree branch cracked / damage.
Yeah. So fallen tree is pretty close. I mean, for fallen tree, there were 32 fallen trees that our forces ended up taking away. So that's pretty close to the, did you say, I don't,
Well, the number was large. It was
it was
266.
266. So I mean, it
And
could
I'm
be,
sure there were multiples, and then some
Yeah.
people
Yeah.
call in different addresses for the same tree. And
yeah.
I was just trying to
you know,
get a sense from that number.
yeah,
How many trees did we actually lose in 410?
I,
It seemed like a lot more than 40
yeah,
on the ground because we had so much damage, but
I think 120
40 is a
limbs
lot.
down, but I
Yeah.
think 120 limbs down is also important to think about, because you can think
Mm.
about a huge, 50, 70-year-old tree. That limb is going to be bigger, much bigger than your average, newly planted street tree, or even a smaller species tree. So that, I think people could be calling that in as a fallen tree, even though it's, one of our
Mm.
coworkers had a limb fall through her windshield and crack it, and damage her car. So it might sound like it's just a teeny tiny limb, but they can actually be quite big. And I think people calling that in could justifiably say it's a down tree.
Mhm.
Right. Well, in the category of tree branch cracked year to date, we have 890 311 service requests in Board 10 compared to 2019, the whole year, 588. So it
Yeah.
just shows the the impact really of the storm. And the same thing for that category of fallen tree. Year to date is 452, but just on August 4th and 5th there were 266. So looking at it as a board, I think that, we're moving into our budget time where the board will advocate for expense and capital priorities. And certainly forestry has always been an expense priority for us. But I think this year in our district needs statement, we're going to delve a little bit more because of the impact of the storm. And even moving forward, many of the board members and members of this committee have talked about, funding and we're in a COVID world and we understand the budgets are being cut, but certainly to really highlight the need for tree maintenance is just paramount.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think a lot of people in Bay Ridge are shocked to hear just how much tree cover we have. And that actually is one of my other questions, which is, how does Bay Ridge compare to like Brooklyn as a whole, or maybe other neighborhoods? I know you might not have the data for other neighborhoods in front of you, but like, how bad was CB10 hit versus like some other parts of Brooklyn? Did we take up a lot of time for the parks to like come out here because we have so much tree cover? Just some context for some of the numbers.
Yeah, I mean, I think looking at, this isn't a direct answer to your question, but looking at service requests compared to work orders, or work orders compared to service requests, it looks like for every 2.5 service requests, you get 1 work order, which I think
Right.
is
It's probably
is,
the norm. Right.
yeah, and so work orders for total for, I think between here and between Bay Ridge, I would say Marine Park is another neighborhood that just gets it's a lot of older single family home neighborhoods that have, like, we don't get a lot in Williamsburg, for example, because it's all so dense and it's big buildings. But in Marine Park, Borough Park, Bensonhurst, you get a ton of places where there are a lot of single family homes, especially around, right, if you think about when these neighborhoods were really built out in the 50s, the trees are kind of reaching about a 70-year limit where they're pretty large, and so tree branch falling is going to have a pretty big impact. You also, I mean, I don't want to bring it up, but you're going to get heaving when these trees grow on the sidewalks as well, and all sorts of nightmares like that. So I think it's just kind of, I would say Bay Ridge. I mean, if I did it just on council members calling in things, I would say Bay Ridge is definitely on the top, because you guys definitely have some vocal council members. They definitely know my cell phone number for sure, and all my staff numbers. So we thank you for that. Also the state senator, thank you. But Yeah, I mean, yeah, I think, you know, I think it's just kind of the design of the neighborhood
Yeah.
and kind of the rough age that it is that
That 70-year lifespan is really interesting because that does go right back to when a lot of our development really starts up. And a lot of our trees, now that I'm thinking about it, are massive in this
Right.
neighborhood. We don't have a lot of younger, narrower trees.
Yeah.
So that's really interesting. Thank you.
Yeah, we have a lot of magnificent trees, I would say,
Yeah.
too. You know, some really, a lot of London planes. You know, we lost a lot of silver maples, but we still have some, you know, pretty mature trees here that we're concerned about, and we
Yeah.
think that the maintenance of those trees clearly is very important. Also, Davey, while I have you, I wanted to ask about sidewalk damage resulting from some of these large trees that came down. We have a few that are in limbo. Are we any closer to figuring out how to get those fixed?
Yeah, I knew I shouldn't have mentioned that, but no, it's definitely a big issue across the city. You know, right now we are still trying to figure out how we contract for it. We don't have an active contract to come in and replace the trees and sidewalks. We normally have a trees and sidewalks program, but with budget cuts, I would not. It's not in a great shape right now. So, you know, what I would say to homeowners or property owners that have tree damage and sidewalk, the first step is always document it as much as possible. You know, you can talk to your insurance companies about, you know, whether you can, you know, whether if you pay for it, they'll reimburse you. I mean, I
Yeah,
take pity on anyone having to go down that route.
we've spoken to homeowners and they've said absolutely not. They're
Absolutely.
waiting
Yeah,
for
I
the
get it.
city, and
I get it.
I mean,
So
we have some sidewalks that are just not passable. We have one in
Yeah.
particular that's very bad.
the other option, you know, I think is actually preparing it yourself and then filing a claim with the comptroller's office. I know it's kind of a leap of faith, and you have to trust that they're going to reimburse you back, but you know, I think that is the system that's set up in place right now. So that's you know, if you want it replaced quickly, I would say that's your best bet. Otherwise, you know, you might be waiting a pretty long time given the financial situation we're in right now.
I have a question. Do you know why, and excuse me if this is beyond your purview, but do you know why this particular storm was so damaging to trees? The storm didn't seem so ferocious, and I was absolutely shocked when I went out the next day and saw
Yeah.
so many trees down.
Chris, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, Chris or Lauren, feel free to jump in on this one, but I think it's a combination. I think first of all, the winds were really strong. And then I think the second thing here is that you got a bit of rain, and that rain kind of loosens up the ground. Yeah, that's the only thing that I can explain, but it's mostly just a wind condition, you know.
And I would add, Marty, I mean, we're going to delve a little bit more. If I had a bigger staff, I think I would, I really love to look at this data. But what we're concerned about too is that, you know, with budget cuts and the longer pruning cycles, many of the trees that came down, and my numbers are a little off from Davy's numbers, you know, a good percentage of them had prior tree maintenance requests on them. So I think we want to delve into that a little bit more. You know, is there a relationship? I'm not an arborist, but I look at numbers. And so when I look at trees that came down and look to see, you know, I do a 5-year cross and see how many trees had prior tree service requests. I think that's important for us as a board to know, because, you know, anecdotally, people come in and tell us all the time, the trees aren't being pruned enough and often enough, and that's budgetary and it's funding. But I think it's something that we should delve into a little bit more as a committee in terms of our advocacy for funding for parks.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll say one more thing. You know, our regular tree maintenance program is on a 7-year cycle, meaning every tree gets looked at every 7 years. That's better than industry standards, actually. I think industry standards is about 10 or more. I don't know what it's going to look like in the next couple fiscal years with you know, where we are financially. But it might not seem like a lot, but it's what the industry typically does to look at trees.
Right. And I think we have a lot of larger trees that may need, I mean, I think some trees can fit the 7-year pruning cycle, but I think some of the largest trees, no, you know, just from what we hear at the ground at the district office, and the thought of it being extended to more than 7 years is a little frightening, frankly.
It's simply dangerous. I mean, you know, the way that they overgrow and covering street signs and stop signs and everything else, is it creates a very, very dangerous situation throughout the neighborhood. So we're going to go out there with our own scissors and saws and
There's a
ourselves.
citizen pruning course that you can take if you'd like to, you know.
And we
have
had
a-
some board members who were citizen pruners in the
Yeah.
past.
So yeah.
Okay, thank you
Yeah.
so much. And I just want to say from the district office staff, I know Dorothy and I, we sent Parks over many of those emails during the storm. Probably, I don't know, 20 a day, would you say, Dorothy? People yelling at us. And so we appreciate your patience with us as well. So thank you.
Are there any other questions that anyone would like to raise this evening? If not, I want to thank Davey and Chris and Lauren from the Parks Department. And I thank you all for joining us this evening. We will report on this. We'll give an informational report on Monday evening at the general board meeting for September. And I'll look forward to getting the recording to make sure that my notes, that I could write fast enough. So if there's nothing else, I guess we can adjourn.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you,
Thanks again. Have
everybody.
a good night.
Thank you.
Well,
Be
bye-bye.
well, everyone.
Right.
Take care.
Take
Take
care,
care.
guys. Have a good one.
And happy first meeting for everyone whose it was their first
Yeah.
meeting.
Thank you.
Have a
Thank
good
you
night.
very much.
Hey.
Thank you.
Okay, bye.